A new generation leading the fight against climate change.
350 schools saving 500 million liters of water across the project. It's just insane.
In an effort to save the most vulnerable.
The water was really much.
Millions affected by the changing climate.
Ola era grande y el viento como pasaba los árboles. Eso no me gusta recordar.
In the front part, we really needed a tube shape.
Students committed to making a difference.
I really believe that we can make a better impact and a more sustainable society.
While we lose the forests.
When the fire was burning so intense here, this was just ashes. We're losing all our animals because people are not respecting nature.
And the glaciers.
The air is getting thicker and hotter, and actually the glaciers evaporating.
Young people are renewing the urgency to tackle climate change.
These animals really need an active effort to get them to survive and be here for the next generation.
Before it's too late. 0 Hour. Africa and Latin America. Next.
After the massive effects of climate change in my home village, the heavy rains, the strong winds that washed away our crops, leaving the land bare, my parents had to sell off our land and livestock to sustain our lives. I am lucky that I am still surviving, and I will not take this chance for granted. And by this, I joined fellow young activists to protect our future. We are a generation of scared people, but very ambitious, very united, very persistent, and very good at action.
The world's second largest freshwater lake has birthed its shores again. This is the second time that the water levels on Lake Victoria have risen above the shoreline over the past year.
Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced, and at least 100 have been killed since the flooding began.
In Uganda, the rising waters of Lake Victoria are destroying its coastal towns. The very lake that millions of people depend on for food and water has now become a threat to their way of life.
Right where we are, you can see that there is a lot of development, urbanization, a lot of iron sheets roofed, like tarmacked roads, and also people tend to clear vegetation in the nearby catchment areas of Lake Victoria. So this is the one where there was...
Lawrence Aribo is one of the leading meteorological experts in the country, studying climate change here for the last 25 years.
Once vegetation is not there and it rains, you see that water runoff flows with a lot of sand siltation. These ones prevent the natural infiltration of water into the soils and causes runoff. So what will that mean? It means the water levels could easily rise. And once it rises, these people will further be displaced from here. Their businesses will be affected. Diseases associated with the water will be there. So it will not be easy for people.
Josephine Nakintu knows this all too well.
Embeera eri gye twalimu mu biseera biri nga amataba gano tegenda tulumba yali nnungi nga batandise okubeera nga wajjula bagenda basenguka ye obulamu bwaffe bwatandika okukyankalana.
Josephine lives in the village of Gaba, where she sells tea, donuts, and fish.
Walinga webaawo jukira muno mwabangamu amakubo ebikubo bwe biti ebyambuka kati mulimu walimu ekikubo wali eri. Nalinnya ku kibaawo bwe nti n'enseerera. Nali mu buutusi n'engwa mu mwala naye omwala guli gwe nagwamu gwali muwanvu naye katono nfiiremu. Ne Mukama nannyamba waliwo kataapu awo ke neekwatako n'envaayo mu mazzi. Ne mbeera ewaka ebbanga eryo lyonna myezi ndooza ng'ena. Abaana bange we bali bajja tambuzako nga nze bwe ntudde awo. Mutufu omuntu nga wagwa mu mazzi gano otya okudda ogamba nti eri nali nfiiriddeyo siddayo. Bambi abantu bagwamu nnyo nga bw'okiwulira. Kyekintu kale kyasinga otunyingiza abantu kubanga tebakyajja abantu batono ffe twajjuzanga muno abantu.
Once the villages are flooded, there's no going back. Today, Josephine takes Lawrence to the worst affected areas of her old village.
Eyo yonna amazzi nga gayingirayo eyo. Gino gyonna gyali midaala gy'abantu gino gy'olaba. N'amazzi gonna baabagobawo bonna tebakyakola. Kano gonna nga bw'olaba. Wano wonna midaala gy'abantu, abantu bonna baavaamu. Wano wonna bw'olaba wano. Negakujjawo negakutwala.
Water was really much, eh?
Nga litwala abantu kati nga wano namwe mwalimu amakubo muno agaali gatuusaako eri bakasitoma gye twali tukolera.
So the road has been destroyed.
Byonna byagwawo.
In Uganda alone, the fishing industry employs up to 1 million people. Those are jobs that could be lost to climate change.
Lake Victoria supports the economy in many ways. The fish we get from the lake, some is exported, and that earns money to the country. Lake Victoria also generates electricity. The lake provides water for the industries and even for domestic use. So if climate change, heavy rains come and block the lake or the channels of movement, it becomes a problem. And fish breeds along the shores. And once flooding continues and people continue destroying, they are destroying the breeding places of the fish. And that will be a very big problem.
The Ugandan government has asked people to settle at least 200 meters away from the lake shores and to stop farming on the steep slopes to reduce erosion. But this fix will be, at best, temporary.
Kati mbadde neebuuza kati mugenda kutuyambira wa ku buzibu buno bwe twatuukako okubanga tusobola okudda mu kifo kyaffe kino oba okubanga tuddamu okukola nga bwe twakolanga.
Now the problem here is this place is low, very low. And when the rains are heavy, the water will still come back. So the best thing would be for people not to stay in this low area. At least they move to a raised ground where the floods cannot come back. Because now here is very dangerous. The diseases, cholera, dysentery, and for children, it is not good. We just pray that things will be okay.
My name is Jason Samuels. I'm from Cluttersville and we're currently at Cluttersville Primary School. My mother went to the school and they used to call it the Green School. I'm finishing off my studies that was research into how schools use electricity. And we had a focus on behavioral interventions and efficiency interventions. It's really nice to come back to school to be able to do research that changes how they manage their water, their electricity, and that creates savings for them. So specifically, it's the Internet of Things with regards to how water is managed and how energy is managed. So how that played out was that there was a smart water meter created and a smart energy meter created. And I mean, that's where it all started. So if you can measure it, then you can manage it and you can be aware of it. So the project is called the Dropilla Project, and it is the Smart Water Meter Challenge, where schools would then compete basically against each other to see how much water they could save. And they used the Count Dropilla. That was the name for the smart water meter, to then log what they would use and then compete against each other, and then they would get a prize. So instead of sucking blood, it just sucks away the water wastage, which is quite interesting. Going from academics into people's actual lives, that doesn't always happen. But with these projects, it actually happened, which was amazing. So yeah, I really like to do this research where it translates well into the real world. In our project, we gave schools their data back. We just visualized it in a nice, understandable way, and we also educated them on how the tariffs work. So they knew when they used what, and also how much they paid. With the water project, it went from 5 schools, and just from a professor wanting to help out one school that his daughter was at, to 350 schools across the province of the Western Cape, and them saving 500 million litres of water across the project, which is just insane. Millions of litres of water were saved, and millions of rands were saved for schools, and particularly poor schools. The reason why the electricity reduction is so important is that in South Africa, our electricity generation is predominantly from a coal source. So every kilowatt of energy used, you can track that back to some piece of coal that was burnt and some carbon emissions into the environment. So every kilowatt hour that we don't use or that we reduce is then carbon emissions that we reduce as well, which is very, very important for climate change and the bigger picture. So that's how schools can play a role with regards to South Africa contributing to the reduction of the impact of climate change. So now we got the opportunity to actually take the usage of the schools in South Africa, and we could compare it to the usage of schools across the world, which was quite fantastic to see. We still actually use not a lot of electricity, which is interesting. So then you can ask a few questions of why is that? And we also saw a disparity between the richer schools and the poorer schools. The poorer schools would use almost like half the energy usage of richer schools. So our conclusion was that there needs to be more infrastructure investment in poorer schools. They still had old light bulbs that were just drawing too much energy for the technology that we currently have. At that point, we just said, okay, let's replace these lights and see what we can do. I know it sounds very simple, but we then replaced those old fluorescent lights with the best LED light. And when you do that, you get lots of savings, which is amazing. So you don't only get the monetary savings, but you also get the actual light quality improvement for the learners, which I think is a win-win. The technology being used here is the LED technology. This light normally draws about 20 watts, which is really some huge reduction from the previous fluorescent. So how that relates to climate change is that you have less energy drawn out from these lights, and schools have hundreds and hundreds of these lights. And that's a way how South Africa, through schools, are contributing to the climate change goals.
The figures and images showing the rainforest covered by smoke have shocked the world and triggered a global social media frenzy. Scientists warn that rampant deforestation may be pushing the Amazon to a point of no return.
The Pantanal is in danger. The world's largest wetland covers some 200,000 square kilometers, and it's home to endangered animal species, like the elusive South American jaguar. This year's fires consumed 86% of the vegetation.
Horas da manhã não tinha hora para parar, parava meia-noite, 1h da manhã.
Porque aqui eu passo
teve contato com fogo?
Teve.
Volunteer veterinarians like Carla Sassi came from different parts of Brazil to help.
Esse é o pirata, né? Um animal aqui de Socilas, e ele escapou do fogo, mas infelizmente os cascos, né, ficaram bem prejudicados. Está tendo descolamento de casco, né? Ele já ficou com bastante ferida aqui pelo tempo que ele ficou deitado, e é um tratamento bem complexo, né?
Deixa eu ver.
Quando o fogo chegou, circulou. Aí eles foram só passando por cima do fogo e onde foram queimando. E é como aconteceu o pirata, né? Que queimou as patas. E outros animais também que queimou, né? Bicho. Tem tudo quanto é bicho que tem aqui, é veado, até a onça queimou, né?
Vets across the Pantanal desperately performed triage on thousands of animals. Rains eventually put the fires out, but it did not rain much. At this time of the year, bridges and roads should be flooded, another sign that something is wrong.
As chuvas aqui do Pantanal, depois no centro do Brasil, dependem da umidade produzida no Atlântico Norte.
Ele muda quando muda.
Local scientists are trying to figure out the causes for the uptick in fires and the heavy droughts.
Então, essa umidade do Atlântico Norte vem para a Amazônia e desce para formar as chuvas aqui do Pantanal, depois vai para o Brasil Central.
That humidity is disappearing as average global temperatures rise. The Amazon jungle is shrinking. It's being felled for lumber, burned for farming and grazing. The water tap for the Pantanal is effectively being turned off with each tree that's destroyed.
The trees absorb the water from the ground and it releases it through the air, through the leaves of the trees. And all this humidity becomes like a cloud, it becomes like a flying river. So this flying river will bring rain to the rest of the South America, and the Pantanal included.
Ailton Lara is a tour guide in the Pantanal.
Whenever you cut down a tree in the Amazon, that means you get less water in the rest of the South America. Because they destroyed a lot of the Amazon, the Pantanal is being affected directly. So we are getting big droughts and we're getting the fires here. So we are losing our nature, we're losing all our animals because people are not respecting nature. When the fire was like burning so intense here, this was like just ashes and smoke. But right now, looking from above, you see this very green vegetation very beautiful. But if you look at close, you see a dead tree still, but the vines covered, because the vines grow really fast, and it covers the trees, like it becomes like a sort of a canopy. So it gives a false impression that Pantanal has recovered from the forest fire.
The Pantanal remains a vulnerable tinderbox. The creepers hiding these trees also hide the jaguars from view. But Lara has learned not to give up and to count his victories, one animal at a time. Today, that animal has a name, Jeru.
We finally got to see a jaguar. I know him by his pattern marks. So Jeru, we know him for quite a few years, and it's a very strong cat. He specializes on catching caimans. The jaguar can jump from the bank onto the caiman and gives a powerful bite on the back of the head of the caiman. Just one bite and then the caiman is gone.
For Lara, this is hope, the resilience and the majesty of the Pantanal embodied in this great cat, sleeping off a kill along the banks of a river under threat.
My name is Marina Felizardo. I'm 23 years old and I'm a student of architecture and urbanism in the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. We started the bamboo bike project in the beginning of 2019 with a group of 5 students and the professor. The main intention of this project is to learn the making of the bike and trying to take this knowledge to the schools and in the future eventually to make the bike with the kids in the schools. We actually won an award in 2020 in an organization called Transporte Ativo in the category of educational action because of this contact that we made with the schools, middle schools, high schools, about our project and this exchange of knowledge between the university and the schools. We always see architects as people that design houses and buildings, but we also have an important role in the society as thinking the city and how we can make it better for people. So with the bike, we always studied about urban mobility and how it impacts people's lives and how we can make it safer for people and make them start using the bike more because it's more sustainable, it's more healthy than buses and cars. Before this project, I never heard of a bamboo bike. It was something that I really cared about, sustainability, making things that we normally see in some materials made of something totally different. It really caught my eye. We made our first bike in the end of 2019. The bike was in its natural form. You really can see that it's clearly bamboo. The other parts of the bike were from older bikes, normal bikes, that were old, that were rusty, but we managed to take the parts we needed and making a brand new one. This is the laminated bamboo bike, and you can see the pieces of it that it's all glued together with resin. We have some special joints called finger joint. It gives more resistance to the frame. These little squares that are the pegs, and it also helps to keep the pieces together. In the front part, we really needed a tube shape to keep the handlebar very stable, so we made this shape that is kind of round. There are some parts that really need some improvement, like this one and this. Now, in the end of 2021 and in the beginning of 2022, we intend to make more 5 bikes. As a test, we are just starting this project. Bamboo is an incredible material. It's versatile, it's renewable, sustainable. It has a nickname of green steel. It's resistant to tension and compression. It's easy to use it, to cut it, to glue it, and it's versatile. That's why we choose the bamboo to make a bike. The main challenge we face with this project is probably the infrastructure. We didn't have a proper lab to experiment a lot of different frames of the bike. We are now trying to go to a more technological lab and expand our project and make it more bikes and more frames. When I was younger, the first time that I ever heard about sustainability and global warming was in school. And it was always a concern, but when you are young, a teenager, you don't know how to make something to change it, because it always seems like it's only you and it will make no impact in the society and in the world. As I came to the university, I met people that really cared about it, and it's really nice to see that everyone is interested in it and worried about the sustainability, and you don't feel alone anymore. I believe we can make an impact in the environment. In a first scale, our intention is inside the university, but I believe it can grow. It can go to other universities, to the city, to the country, and maybe the world in the future.
It's one of the most distinctive features of one of the world's great mountains, the snow cap atop Africa's Mount Kilimanjaro. But the snows are gradually disappearing, and experts say they may be totally gone by the end of this century. Scientists are divided on why this is happening. The debate could affect our understanding of climate change.
This is a temperature logger that are placed on the southwest of the mountain, and logging humidity and temperature. They are basically on the field for 2 years before we download them.
Simon Matui and his father used to farm their land using traditional methods, but changing weather patterns have affected their crops, so he decided to study the ecosystem in the Kilimanjaro area.
These weather stations has been started working on the mountain since 2000. It provided data that showing what is happening on the top of the mountain where the glaciers are. So what is the weather behaving down below here? It's very much indeed affecting the glaciers' size on the top. Most people think that the glaciers on Kilimanjaro are melting. In other words, if they were melting, then we will see the river full of water. No, that's not what is happening. What is happening on Kilimanjaro, on these global weather parameters, we are having more temperature rise on the atmosphere. The air is getting thicker and hotter, and then actually the glaciers evaporating.
In Tanzania, up to 400,000 hectares of forests disappear each year to deforestation. The impact reverberates all the way to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro.
We really have done an analysis of what the river reserves need. How can we mimic that at a larger scale once these have been deforested?
Sarah Scott founded a community-based initiative called the Kilimanjaro Project.
We do it in two ways. One, we assess what is needed, what are the indigenous trees that have grown here before, and we plant those trees in our nurseries and we'll do reforestation work. But you can find trees that have been cut down and their stumps are there and their stumps are sprouting. And so through a process called FMNR, we prune those trees and allow those old trees to regrow. So there's a combination of restoration and FMNR to restore these riparian zones.
the Kilimanjaro project has been able to plant trees by the thousands, but their goal is to reach 1 million annually.
What we are doing here is FMNR, which is the short form for Farmers Management Natural Regenerative.
In 2018, Samuel Andrew joined the Kilimanjaro project. His passion for preservation stems from his youth. His hometown was devastated by overgrazing of cattle, so Samuel started planting trees in the area.
We are training this kind of species to become big trees. When you prune the other growing from side by side, you let only one standing, and that will absorb all the nutrients, and that will push it to become a big tree.
So the importance of trees along these riparian zones is that their root systems go way into the ground and they hold the soil. And by holding the soil, they stop topsoil erosion when it rains. It also helps increase the water table, because when it does rain, they pull water from the atmosphere and hold it down in their roots. And so this is why it's important to do this restoration work. But it is harder and harder to protect these ecosystems.
Hurricane Iota hit Nicaragua's coast as a Category 4 storm with winds hitting at about 250 kilometers per hour.
As the hurricane moves inland towards Honduras, the greatest concern now are the torrential rains drenching areas devastated just 2 weeks ago by Hurricane Eta.
Eta and Iota, two names that the Mosquito people in Nicaragua will never forget. In the months since the storms hit, dozens of families have returned to Haulover.
Entramos en un canal, pero canal es pequeño. Entramos y ahí agarramos en los palos. Y ahí pasamos, pues, toda la noche mojado.
36-year-old Emma Boudier was one of a handful of residents who stayed put when the first storm landed.
Los niños estaban debajo de plástico, en medio, y nosotros al lado. Los hombres, mi hermano y mi marido, ahí estaban afuera. Estaba sacando el agua de lancha. Ola era grande y el viento como pasaba los árboles, y eso no quería ni pensar. Eso no me gusta recordar. Pensé que voy a morir con mis hijos. Pues ahí en esa lancha, con toda mi familia, con mis hijos, mi mamá y mi hermano. Como no había nada para hacer, como esta vez ya estaba agarrando el huracán, orábamos y lloramos también, como sabemos que vamos a morir, y oramos, lloramos, asustados. Nosotros pedíamos a Dios que Él nos cuidara para volver a ver con mis familias.
Boudier and her neighbors are focused on rebuilding their houses, but to survive in the long run, they need fish. But the storms changed fishing too. The sea has become more dangerous. In the past, during rough weather, the men would head inland for the protected lagoon. It once teemed with shrimp, but the salty storm waters breached that as well. The shrimp have all but disappeared.
Barabaku yang naniyaura, barabaku na iwatut nira, umi balanba nira. Witi na ni dia na ni ayiwar ka na ni daw kiba, nawan yas, witi na ni sin ayiwar.
The mosquito pray for help in their little church, one of the few buildings not washed away by the hurricanes, praying for the weather to go back to how it used to be.
Sabe que es diferente. Mes de enero, mes de febrero, no está como está caliente mucho. Agua de laguna está muy caliente. Por eso tal vez no entra bastante pescado, o no sé. Pero nosotros pensamos eso.
Hotter weather plus damaging storms. People are going hungry.
Antes Jaloba estaba bien bonito, pero ahora se quedó como desierto. Familia quedó para afuera, sin casa, sin nada. Yo también de mi propio quedó para afuera también, porque el huracán vine, se llevó todo. Aquí nomás que yo está parado. Este es el lugar de mi casa. Mi casa es madera alto y bien hermoso. Navidad nosotros pasó abajo de plástico con lluvia, pasamos los 24.
Christmas under tarps, hardly something they'd want to become tradition. Scientists like Marcos Leonardo Williamson predict extreme weather is here to stay.
El futuro cercano que yo le veo es que las comunidades tienen que entrar rápidamente en el proceso de adaptación. Se habla que los huracanes van a tener mucha mayor frecuencia de aquí en adelante y de mayor intensidad. Entonces la adaptación es lo que estuve explicando anteriormente, los medios de vida, cómo se adaptan, las construcciones, cómo la adaptar.
The residents of Hallover would love state-of-the-art, storm-resistant homes, but who might pay for them?
Esa es la parte difícil, ¿no? El cambio climático no golpea a todos por igual. Lo que yo sí creo es que los países que producen más gases de efecto de invernadero deberían tener políticas y medidas financieras para ayudar a estas comunidades.
But local communities cannot wait for the aid to come. Most likely, they will have to relocate.
My name is Dr. Sara Andreotti. I'm a marine biologist and a postdoctoral researcher at Stellenbosch University. Situated in between, the Indian and the Atlantic Ocean, it is indeed a special place. They're putting a lot of effort into transforming ideas into something useful for society, and focusing now on climate change study and specifically putting funding to improve that aspect, which is key, for the future. I'm from Italy and I literally come to South Africa to study white sharks. So I believe we should take a very good care of the 3/4 of our planet. The oceans are taking care of our oxygen level on the planet, and we kind of need oxygen to breathe. So I believe that understanding how interlinked humans are with the ocean will be the first step to push towards sustainable utilization of our ocean resources and protection of the great animals that keeps the ocean balanced. Sharks are a really important component of our ocean ecosystem. If you have too many grazers, then you will have less seaweeds. And with less seaweeds, you have less oxygen production. So that is one aspect that impacts the ocean if you get the top predators out of it. But also with climate change, what you have is an increase in water temperature, and they call it acidification of our water. And with acidification, then that breaks down the CO2. And that's how you get too much carbon released in the planet. Sharks are facing a lot of threats at the moment, and climate change is one of them. The change in water temperature is affecting their prey availability, is affecting their range. And I think shark net is the one threat that we can get rid of as soon as we decide to stop using them. So Shark Safe is basically the fastest way to get rid of these nets into museum to show what horrible thing we used to do to solve the shark-human conflict. In order to save our ocean, we need to save our sharks. The Shark Safe Barrier project is a world first because it is indeed the first nature-inspired, eco-friendly barrier that is shark-specific. It took about 6 years to get the right material and the right robustness without making it too expensive as well. What makes Shark Safe Barrier unique is that it is keeping just the sharks out of the area. And that way the impact to the local ecosystem is reduced because all the other animals can just swim through it. And it doesn't also pose an entanglement hazard, and it doesn't require electricity. Sharks have a very unique sense that allows them to deter very minute electric and magnetic field in the water. And when put in contact with a very strong magnet underwater, the magnet overpowers this sense that the shark have and act as a deterrent. And for the first time, we have something that is copying how nature does that already, which is a thick forest of kelp, combined with this clever idea of using magnetism to deter sharks specifically. We tested the Shark Safe Barrier in Carnsby, which is well known to be one of the roughest places around our coast. Carnsby can have waves that are up to 9 meters. So we did test it in one of the roughest places we could find. And the idea for us was to build something that once it's deployed is going to stay there. Of course, the ocean have a way to break things. So we had to go through 6 years of trial and error to get the right combination of component and welding and floatability and attachment to the seafloor that will make it robust and will make it effective to deploy and retrieve if needed. The Shark Safe Barrier is the first eco-friendly and shark-specific technology that will allow to keep sharks separated from humans in the area where humans want to go and swim and surf. So my hope is that the barrier will become a tool to protect people when needed, but ultimately a tool to get people to understand shark better and not be so afraid of them. And the vision will be to have Shark Safe all over the world where it is needed and have local team to take care of it and use that as an excuse to spark conservation effort and study on the artificial reef and shark awareness campaign because these animals really need an active effort to make them survive and to get them to survive and be here for the next generation. So if you have human-made climate change in combination with an unbalanced ocean, then the effect on the planet is going to be a lot worse than just climate change.
dry spells alternating with torrential rains have decimated food supplies across the region known as the Northern Triangle. 2.5 million people need humanitarian assistance due to hunger and food insecurity brought on by years of drought and erratic weather patterns.
Used to be, you could get by on a Honduran farm with little more than your machete and a silo full of seeds. But the ground has grown parched. The rain scarce. Farmer Manuel Abidam Ochoa harvested just 4 bushels of corn from his land this season. Normally, he collects 50.
Antes aquí todo era cultivo, pero a partir de los inviernos que nos han fallado tanto, así las aguas, nosotros hemos estado dejando ya prácticamente abandonado todo así, a veces por falta de recursos. Y ahí estamos, ahí por ratos haciendo la fuercecita que al esperar que llueva para poder sembrar un poquito, porque aquí no tenemos de dónde, el riego los queda largo de aquí al río.
Abidam is 55 years old, too old, he says, to try something new. But the drought is driving thousands of younger Hondurans away, among them Abidam's only son.
Mi hijo, a mí me da gran pesar que se me haya ido, pero ni modo, ahí tiene que buscar la vida. Papi, yo me voy, me dice. Uno con... Disculpe, a veces uno con dolor en el alma tiene que, ¿cómo le dijera? A veces tiene que hacer riesgos también, porque ellos hacen la lucha para ver si pueden ayudarle a uno.
Abidam's son headed for the U.S. last year, but he ran out of money and stayed in Mexico. Darwin was not so lucky. His father, Pedro, was hoping to fix the roof on his house.
Entonces a veces la carrera es que arreglar 2 palitos, ahí los he montado para que no me caiga la teja. Mira, los palos ya están podridos. Esta parte de allá que está hundiendo desde allá. Aquí hay otra parte que se está hundiendo. ¿Sí? Le he sostenido así con pedacitos de varilla que tiene ahí. Poco y así. Ciertas partes las he ido arreglando así con pedazos de varilla, ¿sí? Ya la varilla es vieja, tiene un poco de años, pues me han corrido unas tejas, unas se me han podrido. Ese era el viaje del cipote a los estados, ¿sí? Decía que él cambiarme el techo, ponerle lámina, cosas así por...
Me agarraron como los nervios, tuve como más de 2 meses que me temblaba el cuerpo, tuve que ir al médico, me pusieron en tratamiento, porque todo el tiempo me pasaba temblando el cuerpo.
This is Darwin's wife, Berta, the mother of his 2 girls and a baby on the way. Berta says Darwin would call every few days from the road as he made his way north.
Tuve unos días que no salían los trenes, decían que iban a caminar y caminaban y caminaba. Yo le decía, ¿cómo vas? ¿Cómo estás? Él me decía bien para preocuparme, pero yo sabía que él iba sufriendo. Porque los demás ponían fotografías y a veces le miraba los pies hinchados, ampollosos.
And then, somewhere outside McAllen, Texas, Darwin collapsed. The heat, The exhaustion proved too much. He went into cardiac arrest.
Yo le decía, no te vayas, que arrocito y frijoles vamos a pasar, pero no te vayas, porque yo no quería que se fuera, pero no me hizo caso. Me siento fatal. Siento que a veces pierdo la fuerza para continuar.
A couple of weeks later, Darwin arrives home. The grief is measureless.
Ay, Dios mío, qué noticia, padre, qué momento. Ay, Darwin, Darwin. Ay, porque mi hermano. Ay, hermanita. Ay, esa maldita caja no es para mi hermano. Esta caja no es para mi hermano. Ay, hermanita, esa maldita caja, mi hermano.
The drought in Honduras has forced many farmers to migrate.
My name is George Moreira. I'm 20 years old. I'm a student at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and I'm majoring in the civil engineering course. The bus shelter came as a design idea, the industrial design course. It's basically aiming to solve, or at least try to solve, a problem that the majority of students faces, which is the problem of the absence of shelter, of adequate places to rest, to wait for example, to wait at a bus stop in the rain, for example. So it's really uncomfortable for the students. We studied the needs, the students and the teachers, the employees from the university. A lot of people that work here also live here in the university. That's like a huge residential village here. There's a lot of demands for this space to be more adequate. So it came as this idea to make this place more convenient for everyone who uses. So right here is the place where we're planning to install the bus shelter that we've been working through in our project. As you can see here, there are not any signs indicating whatsoever that there is actually a bus stop here. Right now that we're having the remote classes, there are not a lot of students here, but when we used to have the live classes, a lot of students from the technology center, from all the engineerings, used to gather here to wait for their buses. This wait, unfortunately, can be a little long, up to 30 minutes, an hour maybe. In a year from now, we'll already have a model in a scale of 1 by 1 that will illustrate better what we're planning to install here. What makes it unique? It's the way that it's been thought, like it's an interdisciplinary project. It unites several areas, for example, the engineering, the laboratory also, the architecture, the design. And I think that when people from the different courses from different areas, they think together, they exchange ideas, I think that it always comes up with something really productive. Mas eu acho que para cá de espaço tem tempo. We've been involved in this project a year now. The bus stop, it is sustainable, especially because of the materials that are going to be used. The laboratory in which we're working on does various tests with different combinations of concretes in order to provide the most sustainable mixture. Bamboo can be used in the concrete itself as one of the parts in the combination. The green wall, it's basically a layer of plants that are going to be installed in the surface of the structure. It's going to be watered by the rain. The solar panels, that is something really tied to the sustainability. For example, if lights are installed for people that are going to use it at night, it also corroborates with the security of the bus shelter. It's not still represented in the model that we made, but they include panels in the ground for people with disabilities, with sighting disability, for example. There will also be a lot of open space for people in a wheelchair, so that they can circle through the shelter with no problem. The idea of sustainability tied with accessibility, which is also really important. It is really inspiring for me to be in an environment like this, to surround myself with people that have the same goal, the same mentality, the same mindset as I do. I think that it is really inspiring. It really stimulates me to go forward and try to achieve the projects that I have.
Josephine Naquinto is back at her food stall on Lake Victoria.
This is the first EPC for schools.
Jason Samuels is showing off the results of his project at his home school, which was just certified as energy efficient.
And then this is the second EPC in the country, which is amazing. So this school got the second one, the university got the first one. It's really phenomenal.
Back in the Pantanal, Sasi the vet is reuniting Silas with his buffalo after months of care in the clinic.
Vai lá, seu Silas, faça as honras da casa.
E conseguiu, né? E ele voltou de volta.
It's the same hope that fuels Simon Matui's quest to prevent the snow peaks of Mount Kilimanjaro from evaporating.
Yeah, they're shrinking back over time.
And in Rio de Janeiro, Marina and her team are trying to figure out how to keep the project going in the middle of a pandemic.
COVID-19 had a major impact in our project because we really need to be together, but we never stop dreaming. We are always optimistic and planning and hoping that it gets better soon.